Webinar on photography insurance featuring Allstate's Howard Burkholz, hosted by ASMP Seattle Northwest Chapter President, Dean Wittick. Dean, take it away.
Okay, so I'm Dean Wittick. I'm with ASMP. Thank you all for coming. We're able to put on educational and social events like this a few times a year because of our great sponsors, one of whom is represented here by Kate Haley, is Glazer's Camera, and another is going to speak to us tonight about insurance for photographers. His name's Howard Burkholz. He's out of Salt Lake, but can service us up here. We have some of his information over on the table over there. And the way this will work is Howard will show a slideshow for about 40 minutes. Then we'll have an opportunity for some questions. You can ask your own questions by coming up here to the mic. And then there are some people around the Northwest at home watching this, and they're going to get a chance to ask some questions. And after that, we can go downstairs and grill some meat, veggie dogs, drink some beer, and that's the way I hope it works from here on out. So thanks for coming, and take it away, Howard.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm happy to be with you. I'm sorry I'm the person in between you and food and beer, so I apologize, especially on the topic of insurance, right? But I'll do the best I can. We'll try to make it lively and interesting, and I'll just get right into it. So a little bit about my background. I've been in insurance for about 19 years. I'm an amateur hobbyist photographer. I shoot a lot in southern Utah, Zions and Bryce and Moab, Arches, all that kind of stuff. I'm just a landscape photographer. And then recently I have some grandkids, so I shoot some grandkid stuff too, which is fun. The two met about 5 years ago at my son's wedding. A wedding photographer asked me about insurance. I said, I know a lot about insurance. Let me dig into that. And it's just grown and grown and grown. We did so well with so many ASMP chapters throughout the Western United States. I approached Tom Kennedy a few years back, and Tom now has vetted us and put us on the national ASMP website as an insurance provider. And we're thrilled with the relationship and happy that we can help. And we have some real good solutions. My website is nationalphotographersinsurance.com. It's on the flyer that's there that's going to be handed out to you today. We'd encourage you to, even if you have insurance, go to our website. There's a little button that says request a quote. Fill out the little short form, and we will prepare a proposal for you that you can use to compare to what you have currently. And, it's not a bad idea to look and see what's out there every once in a while. The next, let's see, go to the next screen. Oh boy. Okay. It's not moving. Go. There we go. Okay. The information that I'll talk about is advisory and not a guarantee of coverage. We're going to be talking about principles of insurance, and I'm not speaking directly to what your insurance policy and contract does. So that's my disclaimer. Okay, so what I talk about and the way I approach this isn't so much just insurance this, insurance that. What we're really trying to do here is manage risk. As you know, in running a small photography business, you have risk exposures. Those exposures need to be managed so that you don't end up paying for and running the cost of mistakes or problems that can happen in the conduct of your business. When you pay premium to an insurance carrier, you're transferring the risk of financial loss from your pocketbook to a third party's pocketbook, which is in this case is the insurance carrier. And we will be talking a little bit about insurance tonight, obviously, but other ways in which you can manage the risk exposures that you have as a photographer. The foundation of every good risk management program, frankly, is a product, an insurance product called a BOP. It's called a business owner's policy. And so we'll be talking about that. It's like a homeowner's policy. It has a whole bunch of coverages on it, not just one or two, usually dozens. And so we'll be approaching it this way. I'm going to be talking about risks that you face and then solutions. And we'll talk about liability. We'll talk about workers' compensation. We'll talk about equipment coverage. We'll talk about equipment rental, and so on. So I'm going to go through this, and then we'll get to your questions. Please make note of questions that you have, because the format that we're using is to actually hold questions until the end. So just make notes, please, if you can, so you don't forget, and as they come up as we go along. Okay, one of the risks that you face as a photographer is causing harm to another person's body. And that's typically a client, or sometimes the other public. But let's say that you as a photographer take your client out to a location in which you want to do a shoot. And while you're doing the shoot, something happens, they slip and fall, and an injury or death occurs. That's what one of the risk exposures that you have as a photographer. A wind can blow a light stand over and strike someone and injure them, and so on. So bodily injury to others is one of the risks that you have. Another one is not only risk to body, but also risk to property. This is an actual shot of a photographer crossing the track at the Tour de France in 2013. What if the information he got about whether it was safe to cross that track was accurate or inaccurate? What if he's crossing thinking that the riders are 30 minutes out, but it's really 30 seconds? And one of them strikes him, or many of them. He gets injured, the riders get injured, and their bicycles get all mangled up and bent up. Photographer at fault, negligent, liabilities flying, and you're going to have a number of lawsuits. So in this illustration, I was just talking about the injury to bicyclists, but also damage to their bicycles, and the expense that the photographer would be faced with that type of a catastrophe. So the solution is, under insurance, there's a coverage called general liability. Typically, the limits are $1 million per occurrence, $2 million aggregate. The word aggregate simply means multiple claims in the same 12-month policy period, and the limit still applies. Still a maximum of $1 million per occurrence, but $2 million is multiple claims in the same 12-month period. We do also offer $2 million per occurrence, and $4 million aggregate is available for most in most situations. We provide, often we're asked to provide certificates of insurance to prove that you have this insurance in place, so that you can go do a shoot at a venue, or to comply with another requirement of a shoot that you may be faced with. Often I'm asked, what's the cost of these certificates? They're free. We do unlimited number of certificates free of charge. There is a charge, however, for the additional insured endorsement on the policy. It just means that coverage or that form exists. It's a $26 a year charge, one time, just once a year, $26. All the certs are free of charge, and we generate those. One thing that I like to mention on this, if I could, is the word additional insured is a little bit deceiving. Sometimes people, the term itself says that makes it sounds like your policy is additionally insuring someone, and that actually is not the case. Let's say hypothetically you're a photographer, you're going to shoot at a casino in Las Vegas. The casino has an insurance policy to insure themselves. They want to be added to your insurance, named as an additional insured. It's not insuring, your policy is not now insuring them. That's very confusing, because that's what it sounds like by the use of the phrase. What's really happening is the additional insured endorsement simply says that your insurance policy is primary and their insurance policy is non-contributory to any negligent act that you may commit. So all they're really saying is, let's define whose insurance is going to cover what. And so again, your insurance is primary, theirs is non-contributory. So if you, in the process of doing a shoot, cause harm or injury to someone, your policy takes the claim, not their policy. And that's really what's happening behind the scenes. Okay, another question that people ask me is, when I use a subcontractor, does my insurance policy cover them? And with relation to general liability, the answer is yes. When you hire a contractor, however, they become you with respect to liability. Since you can't be liable to yourself, the BOP does not cover their bodily injury that they may suffer. So either your subcontractors or your employees' bodily injury is not covered under general liability on a BOP. What is covered is the injury or the harm from your subcontractors and employees that they may cause to a third party or your client in this example. So I think that makes sense pretty much. Now, should subcontractors have their own liability insurance? And the answer is absolutely yes. Let me illustrate. When a general contractor wants to build a building, will his liability insurance cover all liability on the project? Yes, it will, even if a plumber makes a mistake, or an electrician, or a framer, or a cement person. Yes, 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 their policy will cover it. But do they want it to? And the answer is no. So what the general contractor does is says, yes, Mr. Plumber, you can do this job, but you have to prove that you have insurance, name me as an additional insured, and show that you have insurance. And so if you mess up, your insurance policy pays the claim, not mine. So they're protecting their own insurance and their own future expenses, insurance expenses, by saying you as a sub should have your own liability insurance. So photographers, when you use subs, have them get their own insurance. If you wish to go through the process of having them add you to their policy as an additional insured, you should. Is that a lot of extra work? A little bit. But that's the proper practice of having a relationship with the subcontractor. So, okay. And then I know I might have questions on that. So please, again, notate those and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Okay. When you're, I love this example or this situation so that we can illustrate a couple things. This woman in this slide, she could either be the client that has hired you to shoot, or she could be a model that you have hired for a shoot. Let's talk a little bit about that. If this is a client, your general liability should cover this risk if she gets hurt. However, if your client initiates a dangerous shot creative, ask yourself if you really want to take the job. And if you do, get waivers. So if your client is asking you to go into a situation like, we chase tornadoes and we want to get a shot of us really close to one, yes, your general liability would most likely cover harm or injury caused to your client. However, again, it's a dangerous situation. So do you want to take the job when it's risky for your client and for you? And if you do go into a dangerous situation, certainly have the client sign waivers saying that it was their idea and their situation, and they're taking the risk of injury upon themselves. Okay, the next one is, if this is a hired model but not a client, the hired model, the assistant shooter, the makeup artist, the hairstylist, the subcontractor, the employee, whoever it is not covered by general liability. So for this, you need workers' compensation, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. Okay, it's recommended that you have, we recommend that you have all the involved in a shoot contract directly with the client if possible. And what I mean by that is, let's say hypothetically you're doing a shoot and the client will need a hairstylist and a makeup artist. Rather than having the makeup artist and the hairstylist bill come through you, funnel back to the client, have them contract directly with the client. Just say, I do the photography. The hairstylist will contract with you to do the hair. I know somebody, here's a referral. Same with makeup, same with whatever other type of service provider that you may be doing. Refer them to your client rather than hire them and then pass through the contractor, the billing, the cost of that client. It's just cleaner, and it severs the reliability relationship that you have with their activity. So, okay. All right. We've talked a little bit about contracts and waivers if you're going into a situation that you deem to be risky. We've talked about general liability. Major medical. Major medical insurance covers you and your employees if injured, not general liability. And I've said that a couple times. Another insurance that sometimes people are interested in learning about is accident and disability insurance. This covers you and or your employees on or off the job. And I'm going to talk about that in a slide, and as well as workers' comp, which we'll talk about right now. Okay, in many states in the United States, the state legislatures have passed laws that say, we realize when you're hiring a subcontractor that the reason you're doing it rather than hiring them as an employee is to avoid insurance. We know that's what you're doing, and we know you don't want to have employees because you don't want to pay insurance on them or benefits. And so therefore there are laws now, and this is one statute that I picked up from one state, California, and it basically says that the actual determination of whether a worker is an employee or an independent contractor depends upon the number of factors which must be considered. Consequently, it is necessary to closely examine the facts of each relationship and then apply the law to those facts. One of your the ASMP attorneys, Tom Madry, did a webcast recently. It was recorded. You can go out and look at it on the ASMP website. And he basically pointed this out. They will classify a subcontractor based on this definition. If you have the right of financial and or behavioral control over your sub's work and or supply tools, then they would be classified as an employee. Why is this definition important? Is because as an employee, you're required by law to provide workers' compensation insurance. So I know I'll have questions on this, so please write those questions down and let's get those answered for you when we get to the end. But again, subcontractors, to avoid buying workers' comp insurance, it just doesn't fly so much anymore. So I'll answer your questions when we get to that point. Okay, another way that you can protect a risk is injury that happens to yourself. I have an ASMP member client in Colorado. She slipped and fell on the ice. She was off the job. She had an accident disability insurance policy. Actually, a correction. I thought it was $4,700. It was $3,700. She paid, the accident disability paid out $3,700 independent of her medical insurance, which helped her to meet her deductible and also replace some lost income that she suffered as a result of the injury. So a good opportunity. Something like this costs about $40, $45 a year, or excuse me, a month. And with the disability rider, about $86 a month. So something that's good to subsidize your major medical insurance, and it can help you to with not losing income. Okay, another risk exposure that is faced by photographers is the drone situation. Of course, a drone can hit and cause injury or harm to a person. It can also fall from the sky and be broken, and that's a risk exposure that you have. Some carriers won't cover you at all for the land operations of your photography business because you use a drone, even if it's on occasion. So we go out, you say, when I get a call from a photographer that says we need liability insurance and we use a drone, and we get about 10 to 20% of our income from drone and about 80% from land-based type traditional photography. About 9 out of 10 of the carriers won't insure you at all, not for the land portion, because you use a drone. And I've been working with Allstate for years, and it's now approved as of about this time last year, maybe March of last year, it was approved in almost all states. There's 2 that it's still not approved in. We're working on it. But and which Allstate will cover you for the land operation of your photography business, but exclude the drone liability. And for that, you can companion with 2 carriers that we found to be very attractive. One is a product called verifly.com. It's an app you download on your phone, and there at the site where you're going to do a shoot, you test the airspace, you buy the insurance on this job, right on the site for the flight. And it can be, I'm told, anywhere from $10 to about $20 for that flight. And it's fantastic. It gives you $1 million liability insurance. does not cover the physical damage to the equipment, the airborne equipment, but it does cover the liability portion. So it's very inexpensive and a good way to start. Now, if you do 10 flights a month, that's $100 roughly. And if you do that in a year, that's $1,200. So now you've grown out of Verifly. So we have another carrier that would companion with Allstate or with one of the other carriers that we sell with. And it starts around $611 a year for $1 million liability insurance policy. Very, very affordable compared to many of the other carriers out there that I'm hearing that are where they're charging $1,000, $1,200 a year. So, okay. All right. Another thing that we recommend to help you to separate your risk is to separate your personal assets from your business assets. You've probably heard this before, but an LLC obviously helps you to separate your business liability and business assets from your personal assets. If something should go wrong and your insurance policy paid $1 million, but the court awarded $2 million, then your assets are responsible for the second $1 million. If you're a sole proprietor, that means they'll go after your personal assets. If you're an LLC, they'll only be able to go after the assets of the LLC. And so therefore, for a small amount of money, you can create an LLC and give you liability, business separation from your business activity from your personal assets. Okay, another risk that you face are professional liability or errors and omissions. For example, you don't show up at a shoot, you wrote down the wrong date on the calendar. You lose or damage memory cards or film after completing a job. Images are released to the incorrect party and they're published. Reshooting expenses due to legal fees and court costs. More and more what happens is if you fail to deliver a product that you were hired to do it or make mistakes or errors, the courts are awarding damages to the plaintiffs that basically that require you to pay for the reshooting expenses. So for example, in the case of a wedding, no images you get done. The family's furious. Their once in a lifetime event they hired you to do is not produced. And so the court will demand that you pay for flowers and a cake and clean the dress and rent the tuxes and fly grandma and grandpa in from out of town and restage a shoot so that they would be able to have the images that they hired you to produce. So that's common. And this is all provided for under the professional liability portion of the BOP. It's designed to protect you against legal obligations arising out of professional errors and negligent acts or omissions during the course of the practicing of your profession. We have limits up to $1 million. Gets kind of expensive at $1 million limits. Usually we do 25 to 50,000 for most photographers. They're happy with that. The reproduction shoot cost would be roughly 25 to 50. So we can do that. Okay. Another way of handling that is an endorsement or a rider. Sometimes that's easier to say on the Allstate business insurance policy. And that's the called failure to deliver photographic products. It's very similar to E&O or professional liability, but this is a non-negligent trigger. So for there to be professional liability coverage to respond, there needs to be an element of negligent acts. So you have to have made a mistake. This is more of a no questions asked coverage. It'll pay up to $5,000 with a $250 deductible. And there's no negligent act. The photographer can't produce the images due to card failure. The client has to refund the client $2,000. Policy paid $1,750. So a real no questions asked type coverage versus professional liability. There is a negligence trigger necessary for that coverage to respond. Okay, a little bit. Now we're going to get into some equipment. So obviously you have the risk exposure of damaged or stolen equipment. There's two ways in which this coverage is afforded. One is called replacement cost. The other is actual cash value. Replacement cost on the BOP does do exactly that, pay for the cost of a new camera. So for example, let's say that I have a D810 and it gets stolen. Right now today, if you go to Adorama or B&H or wherever you buy your stuff, a D810 is around $2,700 new. That's what the policy pays. Whatever it costs to new buy that product. Real basic, real simple. Actual cash value is a depreciated situation. So for example, let's say that you have a 8-year-old digital camera, and they don't even sell them anymore, but the closest thing to it is X, and that can be purchased used on Adorama's site on their refurbished area for $1,000, but you paid $3,000 for it new. They'd pay $1,000, right? So it's depreciated. Now, inland marine or actual cash value coverage is also very strong with Allstate in respect to professional lenses. I've had more and more clients who have just said, Howard, I had a $3,000 lens. I dropped it, smashed it, unrepairable. Allstate gave me $2,940 for it, seriously. So they depreciate at $60 because professional lenses hold their values extremely well. In fact, sometimes I go and look at Adorama and you'll see that a refurbished lens is $150 less than what the one brand new is, right? So that's an example of what and how actual cash value responds. Now, one thing, on a business owner's policy with relation to equipment, it does not cover your equipment in certain situations. So they're called exclusions. And my job, and the reason that I would like to work with you and work with so many, is because I know the fine print of these policies inside and out, front and back. And I know what it is before the claim happens, not at the time your claim happenings, and I'm giving you the bad news that it's not covered. There are 5 or 6 exclusions on the BOP, all of which are solved with a product we call an inland marine policy. People always ask me, what does inland marine mean? Real quick, history lesson. Back in England in the 1500s, merchants were sending their supplies across land and across the sea to the United States. And they were insuring against land travel of their merchandise and their supplies and goods and across the sea. And Lloyd's of London, one of the original insurers of property, created a product for them called inland marine, and it stuck. And it's a term that we use today. So anywhere in the world. Another exclusion on the BOP is they only cover your equipment in the United States and Canada. So if you take your gear outside, your BOP does nothing for you from an equipment standpoint. And so you therefore should have inland marine coverage. So when we put together a policy for a person, we cover them on both BOP and inland marine so that there's never any surprises down the road. Since we've used this practice, we have never had a property claim decline. Never. We have not once had a property claim decline using this strategic approach. Okay, your equipment is also covered, your insurance also extends to rented equipment. So I get a lot of people who rent from shops, Sammy's, Profoto Supply in Oregon, there's all kinds of them. And when you rent equipment, they want a deposit on a $10,000 lens they put on your credit card. You don't need to do that, no deposits. You just contact us, we send a cert over to the rental house. They take the cert, say you're insured, here you go, waive the deposit. So that's, I think, really helpful. Oh yeah, and then real quick, a case study. This is a client of mine. He posted this and I asked him if I could use this and he said I could, but he stepped backwards doing a wedding shoot into an indoor swimming pool with 2 cameras in hand. That was tonight. A lot of people commented, a lot of likes and shares and all that stuff. Anyway, later he looked and he said, oh my gosh, you're all wonderful. I should check and post more often. I just got wet, camera's still dry. Thank you for so kind and so on. But that would have been covered under his BOP, business owner's policy, and all of his gear is covered replacement cost new. So it would have been absolutely fine. In fact, I was one of the comment that said, MJ, I got your back. You're covered. Don't worry. And then he later on, I was happy to hear that his cameras were dry and there was no equipment damage. Okay, one of the exclusions under the BOP is some water claims. Here's an example. There's wording on the BOP that says, we will cover your equipment on water when it is incidental to the land portion of your journey. So if you're crossing a river and your camera falls in the drink, you're covered on the BOP. But if it's not incidental to the land portion of your journey, so you're floating the Colorado on a 5-day river trip, right? Or you're following Jacques Cousteau, out into the marine land, and you're on a 3-week excursion to film, to shoot an event, not covered under the BOP because it's not incidental to the land portion of your journey. So for that reason, inland marine covers your gear on all water in all water situations, right? So it's the answer. That's the solution. Another one, and I mentioned this earlier, BOP only covers your equipment in the United States and Canada. Inland marine, it gives you worldwide coverage all over. Okay, another risk. You lose business income because your camera is stolen. All your equipment is stolen from a car. So your bag's stolen from your car while you're parked outside your studio or your home. Just a few hours before your shoot, no time to rent gear, you lose money. You're covered under the policy called loss of business income. You just simply provide a copy of the contract and say, I would have made $2,800. Here's the contract. I wasn't able to perform the shoot because all my gear was stolen. And then there's a coverage for that. The extra expense portion is rental equipment. What if there is time for you to go rent equipment and it costs $600 to go rent equipment for a week? You continue to do your work, you continue to make income, you submit your receipt, and you're reimbursed for the loss that you suffered. Another thing that's interesting is most BOPs, there's only 2 companies that we represent, Allstate and Hartford, and there's 10 others, CNA, Travelers, USLI, there's a whole bunch of others that we do that do this. Some BOP policies offer this coverage only when the cost occurs at the named premises. So if you're out doing a shoot and your camera is stolen, they won't cover your loss of business income and extra spend. It only is covered if it happens at your location, the address on your policy as your named premises location. Well, what use is that, right? You guys don't operate that way. That's not the way it's going to work. 99% of the time, it's going to happen out in the field. And so I pointed that out to Allstate. I worked with Home Office, and they have coverage now. It's available on their policy. I know Hartford does it as well. And so we can help you with either carrier, whichever one works out best for you. Okay, another risk that you face is damage to a premises rented to you. Photographers and videographers will protect you if you rent a studio to do a shoot and damages happens to that premises that you rent. Perhaps you're going to rent a hotel or a conference room at a hotel for your 50 high school senior shoot, and damage is done by the seniors to a room while you're at the event covered. So those are some other risks you face. Another one, electronic media damage. I have a client who this just happened, and actually she's from Washington, I think. She's a member of the PPA, I believe, in Washington. She said, I just completed a corporate headshot job for a company, left my SD card in my laptop. I put the laptop in my backpack, camera bag, and forgot to take the card out. When I took it out, the card was bent. She was, put it card down probably and bent the card. No images. What should I do? So there's a company, by the way, out there that I've used, and they're very good, Gilware Data Recovery. And he explained what could probably have gone wrong. And there's the website if you ever have this happen. The policy would have responded by paying for the cost to recover the data from the damaged media. So whether it's a external hard drive, an internal hard drive, an SD card, whatever it is, if it's recoverable and there's expense to recover it, that can be covered under your business owner's insurance policy. Okay, no, I'll skip this. Minor stuff. Another one that is happening more and more. Michelle posted this once. Her website got hacked, and according to the host, 60,000 emails have been sent out from her email address. She called SiteLock. At first, they quoted her $55 a month for a year to fix it. They came back and said because of the severity, it was $275 a month. We have insurance riders on the BOP that can pay for these types of things, including notification to clients if you have their personal data, credit card information, so on your computer, and it's stolen. I recently had a computer stolen from not me, but a client had a computer stolen from their car, and it was hacked into, and information was sent to clients asking for payments. And to the clients, it looked familiar because it was coming from a familiar email address that was associated with that laptop. And fortunately, it was caught before anything bad happened. But the clients reported it by calling first rather than just responding saying, "Why do you want me to put this money where?" and so on. So anyway, but crazy things can happen with stolen computers and hacking that can happen from the outside as well if they don't physically get a hold of the computer as well. Okay, and we have it's called Cyber One Insurance and Data Compromise Insurance, and it's available also too on the site. So now, as far as cost goes, let me just give you a rough idea, and it should be on the flyer that you have there. But for around $375 a year, Allstate can insure a person, a photographer, up to around $40,000 worth of equipment. So $20,000 on the BOP and $20,000 on the inland marine, total of $40,000. With the liabilities that we've talked about, with professional liability, with data recovery, with yada yada, all the stuff we've talked about at medium levels. I did have a slide in there that talked about professional liability at $1 million. That this price is not at the $1 million for professional liability. It'd be $25,000, but we do have higher limits available that would push the price up a little bit. If you own a studio, you own real estate, we can insure that as well on the BOP, and that would increase some costs as well. But that's not a bad price point, and it's been received really well. If you have more equipment, go to our website, nationalphotographyyinsurance.com. There's a button, request a quote. Tell us what you have. It's customizable. Just name, address. I have this much equipment. I have this much, this. I use drones. I shoot this way. This is the type of work I do. Just fill that out, and we'll customize a proposal for you. And generally, again, unless there's exorbitant amount of equipment, it comes in around $375 per year. So that's it.
All right. Well, thank you, Howard.
Yeah. Did I keep it to 40 minutes? I hope I did.
You 35, I guess.
Oh, good. And nobody's asleep. That's good. That's good.
Well, there's